The massive serpentine body of the galactic apex predator crashes through New Terra Colony's protective dome, sending shards of reinforced plasteel raining down on panicked colonists. Alarms blare as the creature's bulk destroys buildings and infrastructure, its thrashing tail leaving destruction in its wake. Colony security forces scramble, their weapons trained on the beast known throughout the galaxy as the Gap. Dylan Bryant, a human zoologist specializing in dangerous Earth predators, watches the chaos unfold from the colony's main plaza. His trained eye catches something the others miss. The creature's movements speak not of aggression, but distress. Its eyes dart wildly, its breathing rapid and irregular. Dylan's mind races, drawing parallels to Earth's most formidable predators when trapped or injured. "Stand down, it's not attacking, it's scared!" Dylan shouts, his voice lost in the cacophony of screams and sirens. Daphne, Dylan's Draconis colleague, grabs his arm. Her scaled skin glistens with sweat, eyes wide with fear. "Dylan, don't be foolish. That's the Gap. No one survives an encounter." Ignoring her warning, Dylan breaks free and sprints towards the thrashing creature. Colony security officers bark orders for him to stop, their weapons tracking his movement. A group of young Draconis females watch in horror, their mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. As Dylan approaches, the Gap's massive head swings towards him. Its eyes, each the size of a car, focus on the lone human. Dylan slows his pace, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. He begins to emit low, soothing sounds, techniques he developed for calming Earth's most dangerous predators. The gathered aliens watch in stunned silence as Dylan closes the distance. The Gap's thrashing slows, its gaze locked on the human. With deliberate movements, Dylan reaches out and places his hand on the creature's scales. The contact sends a ripple through the Gap's body, but it doesn't attack. Dylan strokes the scales, feeling the creature's rapid heartbeat begin to slow. He continues his calming vocalizations, maintaining eye contact with the behemoth. Gradually, the Gap's breathing steadies, its body relaxing under Dylan's touch. The plaza falls silent, save for Dylan's soothing sounds and the gentle rasp of his hand against the Gap's scales. The young Draconis females exchange looks of shock and awe. No one moves, as if afraid to break the spell. Daphne cautiously approaches, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. She watches in amazement as Dylan continues to pet the now docile Gap. "This is unprecedented," she whispers, her voice filled with wonder. The Gap is revered and feared throughout the galaxy. No species has ever survived an encounter, let alone tamed it. As Dylan works with the creature, news of the event spreads rapidly through the Galactic communication network. Across the stars, alien races receive the astounding footage. Allied species see proof of humanity's potential value, while others view it as a threat to the established order. Unknown to the colonists, a cloaked ship hovers above New Terra. Inside, members of the xenophobic Veil Collective watch the scene unfold with growing concern. Their mission to eliminate human threats to their dominance has just become more urgent. Dylan, oblivious to the far-reaching consequences of his actions, focuses on the Gap. He turns to Daphne, noting the new light of fascination in her eyes. "I think we've just made first contact with a misunderstood species," he says, a smile playing on his lips. "Care to help me figure out why it crashed through our dome?" As Daphne nods, joining Dylan in his examination of the Gap, neither realizes that this moment will reshape humanity's place in the galaxy, for better or worse. As Dylan and Daphne began their examination of the Gap, the colony erupted into a flurry of activity. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the sound of running footsteps echoed through the damaged streets. A group of figures in white lab coats rushed towards them, led by a woman with short black hair and determined eyes. "Dr. Zhen?" Daphne whispered, her scales shifting to a pale blue hue. The lead xenobiologist of New Terra Colony approached, her gaze fixed on the massive creature before her. "Incredible," she breathed, pulling out a handheld scanner. "Mr. Bryant, I presume? I'm Dr. Lila Zhen. Can you tell me exactly what you're doing?" Dylan, his hand still resting on the Gap's scales, nodded. "I'm using techniques I developed for Earth's apex predators, low rhythmic vocalizations combined with steady physical contact. It seems to be working, but I'm not sure for how long." Dr. Zhen's team fanned out, setting up more advanced scanning equipment. The air hummed with the sound of machinery coming to life. "Fascinating," she murmured, her eyes flicking between her scanner and the gap. "The creature's vital signs are stabilizing, but there's something else." Before she could elaborate, a gruff voice cut through the air. "Step away from that thing immediately." Commander Marcus Steele strode towards them, flanked by a squad of armed guards. His face was set in a grim expression, weapon raised. "That's an order, civilian. We can't risk up." "No," Dylan interrupted, his voice firm but calm. "Sudden movements might agitate it. We need to maintain this calm state while we figure out why it's here." Steele's mind focused, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I won't ask again. The safety of this colony—" To everyone's surprise, Daphne stepped forward, placing herself between Dylan and the security team. Her scales flushed a deep crimson, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Commander, please. This human has achieved what no other being in the galaxy has done. We must listen to him." A tense silence fell over the plaza. Dylan could feel the Jap's muscles twitching beneath his palm, sensing the heightened emotions around it. He continued his soothing vocalizations, desperately hoping to maintain the fragile peace. "Commander," Dr. Zhen's voice cut through the tension. "My scans have revealed something crucial. The gap, it's pregnant." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Dylan's mind raced, pieces falling into place. "That explains the erratic behavior," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "It wasn't attacking us. It was looking for a safe place to give birth." Steele lowered his weapon slightly, confusion replacing anger. "Give birth? Here?" "It makes sense," Daphne added, her scientific curiosity overriding her earlier fear. The gap must have sensed the colony as a potential sanctuary. Its actions were driven by instinct, not aggression. As the implications of this revelation sank in, a sleek ship descended from the sky, touching down nearby. Its doors hissed open, revealing a tall, willowy figure with iridescent skin and multiple eyes. Ambassador Zorthax of the Galactic Council had arrived. The ambassador glided towards them, multifaceted eyes taking in the scene. "Most extraordinary," he hummed, his voice a melodious whisper. "Human Dylan Bryant and Draconis Daphne, your presence is requested for an urgent discussion." As Dylan prepared to follow, he noticed Daphne's scales had shifted to a soft purple hue. Her eyes met his, and he felt a strange flutter in his chest. The moment was broken by Dr. Zhen's voice. "Go," she said, gesturing to her team. "We'll monitor the gap's condition, but hurry back. If it's truly in labor, we'll need your expertise." Dylan nodded, reluctantly breaking contact with the gap. As he and Daphne followed Ambassador Zorthax, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Inside the ambassador's ship, Zorthax fixed them with an intense gaze. "What you have achieved here today will send shockwaves through the galaxy. Humanity's standing among the stars may be forever altered." Dylan shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to help a creature in distress." "Nevertheless," Zorthax continued, "your actions have far-reaching consequences. And you," he turned to Daphne, "your defense of the human was most intriguing. The potential for human-Draconis cooperation has not gone unnoticed." Daphne's scales flushed a deep purple, and Dylan felt heat rise to his cheeks. The ambassador's knowing look suggested he understood more than he let on. "However," Zorthax's voice grew somber, "not all will view these developments favorably. There are those who may see this as a threat to the established order. You must be cautious." As night fell over the colony, Dylan and Daphne found themselves volunteering to stay with the GF. The plaza had been transformed into a makeshift observation area, with Dr. Zhen's team working tirelessly to monitor the creature's condition. In the quiet moments between status updates and sensor readings, Dylan and Daphne found themselves drawn into conversation. Daphne explained the intricacies of Draconis mating rituals, her scales shimmering with each word. Dylan, in turn, described the diverse ecosystems of Earth, his eyes alight with passion. Their growing connection was palpable, an unspoken attraction building with each shared story. But just as Daphne leaned in, her scales a brilliant shade of violet, A low rumble shook the ground. The gap stirred, its massive body tensing. "It's starting," Dylan breathed, rushing to the creature's side. "The gap is going into labor." As chaos erupted around them, neither Dylan nor Daphne noticed the shimmer of a cloaked ship above the colony. Inside, members of the Veil Collective prepared for their infiltration, their weapons primed and their intentions deadly. In the command center, a silent alarm flashed on Commander Steele's console. His eyes narrowed as he barked orders to his team. "Unknown hostiles approaching. All units, prepare for potential engagement." The night air crackled with tension as multiple threats converged on New Terra Colony. The Gap's impending birth, the Veil Collective's imminent attack, and the blossoming connection between Dylan and Daphne all hung in the balance, ready to reshape the future of humanity and the stars. Galaxy. As Dylan contemplated the weight of Ambassador Zorthax's words, a low, rumbling groan reverberated through the air. The Gap's massive body tensed, its scales rippling with each contraction. "It's starting," Dylan breathed, rushing back to the creature's side. "The Gap is going into labor." Daphne followed close behind, her scales shifting to a pale green of concern. As they approached, the ground beneath their feet trembled, small fissures spreading across the already damaged colony dome. "We need to move it," Dylan said urgently, his eyes darting between the laboring Gap and the straining infrastructure. "The contractions could bring the whole dome down on us." Dr. Jen nodded grimly, her fingers flying over her datapad. "Agreed, but where? And how do we move a creature of this size safely?" Dylan's mind raced, drawing on years of experience with Earth's largest mammals. "Outside the dome, it needs space, and we need to minimize the damage." He turned to Daphne, his expression determined. "We'll guide it, slowly, carefully." As they prepared to coax the Gap towards the damaged section of the dome, Commander Steele's voice crackled over the colony's communication system. "All security personnel, be advised. We have detected unknown hostiles approaching the colony. Prepare for potential engagement." Dylan and Daphne exchanged worried glances. The situation had just become infinitely more complex. "We have to move now," Dylan insisted, placing his hand on the Gap's scales. He began his soothing vocalizations, gently urging the creature forward. The Gap's movements were sluggish, each step sending shockwaves through the colony. Daphne positioned herself on the opposite side, her strength helping to guide the massive beast. Behind them, Dr. Jen and her team followed with their equipment, ready to assist at a moment's notice. As they neared the damaged section of the dome, chaos erupted. Energy blasts lit up the night sky, and the sound of weapons fire filled the air. The Veil Collective had launched their attack. "Keep moving!" Dylan shouted over the din, his hand never leaving the Gap's side. Debris rained down around them, a stray energy blast scorching the ground mere feet away. Daphne pressed closer to Dylan, her scales flushing a deep blue of fear and commitment. "We're almost there," she chittered, her voice strained. The Gap let out a pained bellow, its contractions intensifying. Dylan could feel the creature's muscles rippling beneath his palm, the birth imminent. They finally breached the dome's perimeter, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heated battle behind them. Dylan guided the Gap to a clearing, his heart pounding in his chest. "Daphne, I need your help," he called out, positioning himself near the Gap's rear. "We're going to have to assist with the birth." Daphne nodded, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. She moved to Dylan's side, awaiting instructions. "When I give the signal, I need you to support the newborn's head," Dylan explained, his eyes fixed on the Gap. "Be gentle but firm. Its skull will be soft." As they prepared for the birth, movement in the surrounding vegetation caught Dylan's attention. Local predators, drawn by the commotion and the scent of amniotic fluid, began to emerge from the shadows. "We've got company," Dylan warned, his voice low. "We need to protect the Gap and its offspring." Before Daphne could respond, a squad of Veil Collective operatives burst from the tree line, their weapons trained on the group. "Step away from the creature," the lead operative demanded, his voice distorted by his helmet. Dylan stood his ground, placing himself between the operatives and the laboring Gap. In a desperate gamble, he turned to the massive creature, locking eyes with it. "We need your help," he said softly, making a sweeping gesture towards the operatives. To everyone's astonishment, the gap responded. It shifted its massive bulk, positioning itself to shield Dylan and Daphne from the approaching threat. The operatives halted, clearly unprepared for this development. The standoff was interrupted by a wet, squelching sound. Dylan turned to see the first of the gap's offspring emerging. "Now, Daphne!" he called out. Together, they guided the newborn gap into the world. It was smaller than Dylan had expected, but still larger than a full-grown human. As soon as it found its feet, the newborn moved to its parent's side, mimicking its protective stance. The sight of the two gaps defending the humans seemed to give the Veil Collective operatives pause. They lowered their weapons slightly, uncertainty evident in their postures. In the distance, the whine of approaching ships filled the air. The Galactic Council's response team had arrived, their presence causing the Veil Collective operatives to retreat into the shadows. As the immediate danger passed, Dylan turned his attention back to the adult gap. Its breathing was labored, its body tense. "There's more," he realized aloud. "The birth isn't complete." Daphne moved closer, her scales now a swirl of colors reflecting her mixed emotions. "What do we do?" Dylan met her gaze, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. The adrenaline of the situation, combined with the intimacy of their shared experience, sent a jolt through his body. Before he could respond, the adult gap let out another bellow. The ground shook, and in the distance, Dylan could see the Galactic Council's medical team approaching cautiously. "We keep going," he said, his voice filled with drive. "We see this through to the end." As they prepared for the next phase of the birth, Dylan couldn't help but feel that this night had changed everything. For the colony, for humanity's place in the galaxy, and for his relationship with Daphne. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. Together, whatever challenges lay ahead. As dawn approached, the night's events took their toll. Dylan's muscles ached from the constant tension, and fatigue clouded his mind. He glanced at Daphne, her scales a muted blend of exhaustion and commitment. Despite their weariness, they pressed on, knowing their work was a long way to go. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the early morning air. Dylan turned to see a convoy of sleek metallic transports emblazoned with the Galactic Council's emblem. As they came to a halt, a tall, willowy figure emerged from the lead vehicle. "Dr. Zelnara," Ambassador Zorthax announced, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. "Our foremost xenobiologist. She will assist with the ongoing birth." The doctor moved with fluid grace, her iridescent skin shimmering in the pre-dawn light. She approached Dylan and Daphne, her eyes quickly assessing the situation. "Impressive work," she said, her voice a melodious whisper. "You've managed to safely deliver the first offspring, but I sense there's more to come." As if on cue, the gap let out a low, rumbling groan. Dylan placed a hand on its flank, feeling the muscles tense beneath his palm. "You're right," he confirmed, locking eyes with Dr. Zelnara. "We're looking at multiple births. The contractions are intensifying." Dr. Zelnara nodded, gesturing to her team. They quickly set up advanced medical equipment around the birthing site, transforming the clearing into a makeshift field hospital. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing real-time data on the gap's vital signs. As the night progressed, Dylan and Daphne worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Zelnara and her team. The gap delivered 3 more offspring, each birth more challenging than the last. Dylan's expertise in Earth's megafauna proved invaluable as he guided the creature through difficult contractions and helped position the newborns. Daphne's strength and dexterity allowed her to support the massive offspring as they emerged, preventing injury to both mother and babies. Her scales shifted through a kaleidoscope of colors, reflecting the intensity of the experience. Throughout the night, Dylan and Daphne's teamwork became seamless. They anticipated each other's needs without words, moving in perfect synchronization. Dr. Zelnara watched their interactions with keen interest, recognizing the unprecedented level of human draconis cooperation. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, exhaustion finally caught up with them. Dylan and Daphne stumbled away from the birthing site, their bodies covered in a mix of amniotic fluid and other birthing materials. They collapsed against a nearby tree, their bodies pressed close together. In that moment of shared triumph and fatigue, something shifted between them. Dylan turned to Daphne, seeing the play of emotions across her scaled features. Without thinking, he leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a passionate embrace, the culmination of the night's intensity and their growing connection. Daphne's scales flushed a deep, vibrant purple, her clawed hands gripping Dylan's shoulders. From a short distance away, a group of Draconis females observed the scene with a mixture of shock, jealousy, and undisguised curiosity. Their chittering whispers carried on the morning breeze, a reminder of the unprecedented nature of this interspecies attraction. The moment was shattered by the harsh crackle of Commander Steele's voice over the colony's communication system. All personnel, be advised. The Vale Collective has regrouped and launched a new assault on the colony. Their primary targets appear to be Dylan Bryant and Daphne. All security forces converge on the Yap birthing site immediately. Dylan and Daphne sprang apart, adrenaline surging through their tired bodies. They rushed back to the Gap and its newborns, determined to protect them from this new threat. Ambassador Zorthax glided forward, his expression grave. This situation has escalated beyond a mere colonial dispute, he announced, his voice carrying an unexpected weight of authority. By the power vested in me by the Galactic Council, I hereby invoke the Interspecies Envoy Protocol. Dylan Bryant and Daphne are now declared official interspecies envoys, granted full diplomatic immunity. Any attack against them will be considered an act of war against the entire Galactic Council. The declaration sent shockwaves through those gathered. Dr. Zelnara's team exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and concern. Dylan and Daphne stood frozen, the implications of their new status slowly sinking in. Before they could fully process this development, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Dylan's eyes widened as he recognized the sound from his military training. "Electromagnetic pulse," he shouted, diving towards the medical equipment. "Everyone, power down your—" His warning came too late. A blinding flash of light erupted from beyond the tree line, followed by a wave of invisible energy that swept through the clearing. Holographic displays flickered and died, and the hum of advanced medical equipment fell silent. In the sudden quiet, Dylan heard a weak, desperate cry. His heart sank as he realized it came from the youngest Gap offspring, the one that had struggled most during birth. Without the support of the medical equipment, its life hung in the balance. Dylan locked eyes with Daphne, seeing his own drive reflected in her gaze. Without a word, they both knew what had to be done. "Dr. Zelnara," Dylan called out, already moving towards the distressed newborn. "I need your assistance. We're going to attempt an emergency procedure, one that's never been tested on non-Earth species." The xenobiologist's eyes widened, but she nodded, recognizing the gravity of the situation. As they prepared to save the young Gap's life, the sounds of battle grew closer. Energy weapons fire lit up the sky, and the ground shook from explosive impacts. Dylan took a deep breath, pushing aside his exhaustion and fear. With Daphne at his side and Dr. Zelnara lending her expertise, he began the risky procedure, knowing that the fate of this young creature, and perhaps the future of interspecies relations, rested in his hands. Hands. The young Gap's life hung in the balance as Dylan, Daphne, and Dr. Zelnara worked tirelessly to stabilize its condition. Their efforts paid off as the newborn's breathing steadied, its massive chest rising and falling with increasing regularity. As the immediate crisis passed, the reality of their situation came crashing down. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by the whir of incoming transport ships. Dylan looked up to see a swarm of sleek, multicolored vessels descending from the sky, their designs as varied as the alien races that piloted them. "Galactic Media," Ambassador Zorthax announced, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the approaching ships. "Word of your achievement has spread faster than we anticipated." Before Dylan could process this information, a flood of alien reporters poured into the clearing. They were a cacophony of shapes, sizes, and colors, each brandishing recording devices of varying complexity. Questions in a dozen different languages assaulted Dylan's ears, the colony's translation software struggling to keep up. Daphne pressed closer to Dylan, her scales flushing a deep blue of anxiety. He instinctively wrapped an arm around her, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the assembled press. A chorus of excited chittering and electronic beeps erupted from the crowd. "Mr. Bryant! Miss Daphne!" A tentacled being pushed to the front, its gelatinous body quivering with excitement. How does it feel to be the first human draconess pair to successfully assist in a gap birth? Dylan opened his mouth to respond, but Ambassador Zorthax smoothly interjected. The colonial administration will be arranging a series of press conferences to address all your questions. For now, our heroes need rest. As if on cue, a group of colonial security officers formed a protective cordon around Dylan and Daphne, guiding them away from the clamoring reporters. As they walked, Dylan couldn't help but notice the way Daphne leaned into him, her body fitting perfectly against his side. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Dylan and Daphne found themselves at the center of a media storm, their every move scrutinized and broadcast across the galaxy. They sat through countless interviews, their responses becoming more in sync with each passing day. During a particularly grueling press conference, a reporter from a silicon-based species asked about their apparent chemistry. "You two seem to move as one. Is this a result of your shared experience with the GAP, or is there something more personal at play?" Dylan felt heat rise to his cheeks, acutely aware of Daphne's presence beside him. Before he could formulate a response, Daphne's scaled hand found his under the table. Her touch sent a jolt through his body, and he found himself leaning closer to her as he answered. "Our experience with the GAP was certainly intense," Dylan began, his eyes meeting Daphne's. "It forged a connection between us that's hard to put into words." Daphne nodded, her scales shifting to a warm pinkish hue. "We've developed a deep understanding of each other," she added, her voice soft but clear. "It's been essential for our work with dangerous species." Their response set off a new round of excited chatter among the assembled reporters. As the questions continued, Dylan became increasingly aware of the growing tension between him and Daphne. Every shared glance, every accidental brush of their hands, sent sparks through his body. As the days wore on, Dylan and Daphne found themselves spending more and more time together, both professionally and personally. They worked closely with Dr. Zelnara, studying the Gap family and discovering that the young Gaps showed an unusual level of trust towards them. One evening, after a particularly long day of observations and interviews, Dylan invited Daphne to his quarters. As the door slid shut behind them, the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. "Daphne," Dylan began, his voice husky, "I can't ignore this anymore. What's happening between us?" Daphne moved closer, her scales shimmering with a mix of deep purple and vibrant red. "I feel it too, Dylan," she whispered, her clawed hand coming to rest on his chest. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, their bodies pressing together as years of interspecies taboos crumbled in the face of their mutual desire. As they explored each other's alien physiologies, their touches grew bolder, more adventurous. Neither of them noticed the small, blinking light on Dylan's communication panel, indicating an open channel. The next morning, Dylan and Daphne woke to the sound of Dylan's communicator blaring. Commander Steele's voice filled the room, his tone a mix of anger and concern. "Bryant, get to the command center immediately. Both of you. We have a situation." As they hurried to dress, neither of them could shake the feeling that their world was about to change once again. The halls of the colony were abuzz with activity, and Dylan caught snippets of conversation that made his blood run cold. "Did you see the broadcast last night? A human and a draconis? It's unnatural. I think it's beautiful. A new step for interspecies relations." By the time they reached the command center, Dylan and Daphne were acutely aware that their private moment had become very, very public. As they stepped into the room, they were met with a sea of faces, some disapproving, others supportive, but all intensely focused on them. Ambassador Zorthax glided forward, his expression unreadable. "It seems," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "that we have a new diplomatic situation on our hands." Dylan squeezed Daphne's hand, drawing strength from her presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together. As they stood united, facing the room full of expectant faces, Dylan felt a surge of willpower course through him. Ambassador Xorthax's antennae twitched as he continued. The accidental broadcast of your private moment has caused quite a stir across the colony and beyond. We must address this situation immediately. Commander Steele stepped forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Dylan and Daphne. For your safety and to maintain order in the colony, we've decided to implement a temporary separation protocol. Dylan's grip on Daphne's hand tightened. Separation? But we're stronger together. We've proven that time and again. This isn't up for debate, Bryant, Steele growled. You'll be reassigned to Dr. Zelnara's team to continue your work with the Gap family. Daphne, you'll be assisting me in bolstering our defenses against potential Veil Collective attacks. Daphne's scales flickered with a mix of indignation and concern. How long will this separation last? Ambassador Xorthax's multifaceted eyes reflected the harsh lighting of the command center. Until we can ensure your safety and stabilize the political situation, this is as much for your protection as it is for the colonies. As Dylan opened his mouth to protest further, Dr. Zelnara stepped in, her voice calm but firm. Dylan, your work with the Gaps has been groundbreaking. We need your expertise now more than ever. Reluctantly, Dylan nodded. He turned to Daphne, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of love and drive. They might be physically separated, but their bond would endure. Over the next few weeks, Dylan threw himself into his work with the Gap family. The young creatures had grown significantly, their massive bodies now requiring specially reinforced enclosures. As he observed their interactions, he noticed patterns in their movements and vocalizations that seemed to carry meaning. One afternoon, as Dylan was recording data on the youngest Gap's behavior, he felt a subtle vibration in the ground. The creature before him let out a low, rumbling sound, and suddenly, the other Gaps in the enclosure responded with similar vibrations and vocalizations. Excitement coursed through Dylan's veins as he realized the significance of what he was witnessing. He quickly called Dr. Zelnara over. I think they're communicating, he explained, pointing to the readings on his datapad. It's a combination of low-frequency vibrations and something else. Pheromones, maybe? Dr. Zelnara's eyes widened as she examined the data. This is remarkable, Dylan. If we can decode this form of communication, it could revolutionize our understanding of not just Gaps, but potentially other dangerous species across the galaxy. As they worked late into the night, analyzing the new data, Dylan's thoughts drifted to Daphne. He missed her terribly, but he took comfort in the encrypted messages they exchanged through the colony's communication system. Each message was a lifeline, keeping their connections strong despite the physical distance between them. Meanwhile, Daphne was making her own discoveries. Her work with Commander Steele had initially been tense, with the gruff humans skeptical of her abilities. However, her draconis intuition and heightened senses soon proved invaluable. During a routine security sweep, Daphne noticed something odd about the behavior of a group of maintenance workers. Her scales prickled with unease as she observed their movements and interactions. Commander, she said, her voice low, I believe those workers might be Veil Collective sympathizers. Steele's cybernetic eye whirred as he focused on the group. What makes you say that, Daphne? Their body language is off. They're too tense, too aware of their surroundings, and there's a faint scent. It's not human. Steele nodded, trusting Daphne's instincts. Good catch. Let's investigate discreetly. Their investigation led to the uncovering of a network of Veil Collective infiltrators within the colony. Daphne's unique abilities were crucial in identifying the saboteurs before they could carry out their plan to disable the colony's main power grid. As news of their success spread, Daphne found herself earning the respect and admiration of the human security forces. She felt a sense of pride in her accomplishments, but it was tinged with longing for Dylan. The forced separation, while difficult, seemed to be strengthening their bond. Each challenge they faced apart only reinforced their desire to be together. Their nightly encrypted messages became a sanctuary, a place where they could share their triumphs and fears, their hopes and dreams. One evening, as Dylan was composing his nightly message to Daphne, an alert flashed across his screen. Ambassador Xorthax was calling an emergency meeting of all key personnel. When Dylan arrived at the command center, he found it buzzing with activity. His heart leapt as he saw Daphne across the room, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared longing before focusing on the task at hand. Ambassador Zorthax's voice cut through the chatter. "We've received word that the Galactic Council is convening a symposium on interspecies relations, and they've chosen New Terra Colony as the host." Commander Steele's face darkened. "A symposium? Now? With the Veil Collective still a threat?" "This is an opportunity we cannot ignore," Zorthax countered. "Representatives from various alien races will be arriving to discuss the implications of human-alien cooperation. And," his gaze fell on Dylan and Daphne, "your relationship will be a central topic of discussion." Dylan felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation wash over him. He glanced at Daphne, seeing his own emotions reflected in her eyes. Their private life had become a matter of galactic importance, and now they would be thrust into the spotlight once again. As the details of the symposium were discussed, Dylan's mind raced with the possibilities. This could be a chance to change perceptions across the galaxy, to pave the way for greater understanding between species. But it also meant exposing themselves to scrutiny and potential danger. The meeting concluded with a flurry of action items and security protocols. As the room began to clear, Dylan found himself drawn to Daphne. They hadn't been this close in weeks, and the pull between them was almost magnetic. "Dylan," Daphne whispered, her scales shimmering with a mix of emotions. "Whatever happens at this symposium, we face it together." He nodded, resisting the urge to take her hand. "Together," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. As they parted ways once more, both Dylan and Daphne felt the weight of expectation settling on their shoulders. The upcoming symposium would test not only their relationship, but also the very idea of interspecies cooperation. The galaxy was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. Higher. As the symposium concluded, Dylan and Daphne found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of attention and debate. Their relationship had become a focal point for discussions on interspecies, cooperation, and understanding. In the aftermath of the event, they were approached by representatives of the newly formed Interspecies Cooperative Research Initiative, ICRI. The offer was unexpected but thrilling: leadership roles in a groundbreaking mission to explore uncharted worlds and foster collaboration between diverse species. Dylan and Daphne exchanged a long look, their minds seemingly in sync. Without a word, they knew this was their chance to make a real difference in the galaxy. "We accept," Dylan announced, his voice steady and sure. The news of their decision spread quickly through the colony. Commander Steele's reaction was a mix of pride and concern. "You two better not make me regret this," he grumbled, but there was a glint of approval in his cybernetic eye. Dr. Zelnara was ecstatic. "This is a remarkable opportunity," she said, her tentacles waving with excitement. "Your experiences with the Gap family will be invaluable in this new role." As preparations for their departure began, Dylan and Daphne found themselves with precious little time alone. Yet in stolen moments between meetings and training sessions, their bond deepened. Each touch, each shared glance seemed to carry more weight than before. One night, as they worked late in Dylan's quarters, reviewing crew manifests and mission parameters, the tension between them finally broke. Daphne's scales shimmered with a deep, passionate red as Dylan pulled her close. Their kiss was electric, igniting something primal and urgent within them both. As they explored each other's bodies, Dylan marveled at the alien yet familiar sensations. Daphne's scales were smooth and warm under his touch, her body responding to him in ways he'd never imagined possible. In the aftermath of their passionate encounter, they lay entwined, basking in the afterglow. Dylan traced the patterns on Daphne's scales, noticing subtle changes in their texture and color. "Daphne," he whispered, "do you feel different?" She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "It's as if my body is adapting to you," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "And your skin feels warmer, more resilient." Their frequent intimate encounters over the following weeks led to more noticeable changes. Dr. Zelnara, intrigued by their reports, conducted a series of discreet examinations. "Fascinating," she murmured, reviewing the results. Your physiologies are indeed changing, adapting to one another. This could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies compatibility. As the launch date approached, Dylan and Daphne's relationship became a symbol of hope for many. The night before their departure, they participated in a traditional Draconis bonding ceremony, broadcast across the colony and beyond. The ritual was intimate and powerful. As they exchanged scales and shared a deep meditation, Dylan felt a profound connection to Daphne that transcended physical boundaries. The ceremony concluded with a burst of bioluminescence from Daphne's scales, bathing them both in a soft, ethereal glow. The day of the launch arrived with a mix of excitement and tension. As Dylan and Daphne made their final preparations, alarms blared throughout the colony. A group of Veil Collective extremists had infiltrated the launch site, intent on sabotaging the Ikrai ship. Without hesitation, Dylan and Daphne sprang into action. They coordinated with their newly formed crew, each member utilizing their unique abilities to counter the threat. Dylan's quick thinking and Daphne's enhanced senses proved a formidable combination. In the midst of the chaos, they found themselves cornered by two armed extremists. Acting on instinct, Dylan and Daphne moved in perfect synchronization. Dylan dropped low, providing cover as Daphne vaulted over him, her powerful tail lashing out to disarm their attackers. With the threat neutralized and the saboteurs in custody, the launch proceeded as planned. As the ship prepared for takeoff, a commotion at the edge of the colony caught everyone's attention. The adult Gap, accompanied by its offspring, had appeared at the perimeter. Dylan and Daphne approached cautiously, their hearts racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. To their amazement, they found they could communicate with the creatures on a rudimentary level. Through a combination of gestures and low-frequency vocalizations, they conveyed their impending journey. The adult Gap, in a display of unexpected intelligence, reached out with one massive appendage. Balanced delicately on its tip was a single, iridescent scale. "It's a gift," Daphne breathed, her voice filled with awe. As Dylan carefully accepted the scale, Dr. Zelnara's voice crackled over their comms. "This is unprecedented," she said, her excitement palpable even through the static. "It appears to be a gesture of respect, perhaps even protection." With the Gap's scale secured safely aboard, Dylan and Daphne took their positions on the bridge of the Ikrai ship. As the engines roared to life, they clasped hands, their fingers intertwining in a perfect blend of human and Draconis anatomy. The ship lifted off smoothly, quickly breaking through New Terra's atmosphere. As they accelerated towards their first destination, an incoming transmission caught their attention. "Incoming message from Galactic Council headquarters," the communications officer announced. Dylan and Daphne shared a look of anticipation as they opened the channel. The news that greeted them sent a wave of excitement through the entire crew. Earth's application for full Galactic Council membership had been fast-tracked, due in no small part to recent events. As the ICRI ship pushed deeper into space, Dylan and Daphne stood at the helm, their bodies close, their minds linked in ways they were only beginning to understand. The vastness of space stretched out before them, full of promise and potential. Their journey had only just begun, but already they had changed the course of galactic history. As they set course for the uncharted planet that would be their first mission, Dylan and Daphne felt a shared sense of purpose and possibility. The unknown lay ahead, filled with danger and discovery in equal measure. But together, they were ready to face whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. Stars. The vastness of space stretched before them, a canvas of endless possibilities waiting to be explored. As their ship, the Ikrai Horizon, approached the uncharted planet designated XB-742, Dylan and Daphne stood side by side on the bridge, their hands intertwined. The planet's surface was a swirling mass of emerald and sapphire, with vast continents covered in dense vegetation and sprawling oceans that glimmered in the light of the system's twin suns. "Atmospheric composition analysis complete," announced the ship's AI. "Oxygen levels suitable for human and Draconis respiration. No detectable toxic compounds." Dylan nodded, his eyes fixed on the planet below. "Looks like we've got a green light for the expedition. Daphne, what do your senses tell you?" Daphne's scales shimmered with a mix of excitement and concentration. I'm picking up on complex biosignatures. This planet is teeming with life, Dylan, and there's something familiar about it. As they began their descent, the ship's sensors detected a clearing large enough for a safe landing. The jungle canopy parted, revealing a lush valley nestled between towering mountains. The moment the horizon touched down, the expedition team sprang into action, eager to begin their exploration of this new world. Dylan and Daphne led the first scouting party into the dense foliage. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, and the sounds of unseen creatures echoed through the trees. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, Daphne's scales began to pulse with a soft bioluminescence. "There's something big nearby," she whispered, her body tensing. "It's curious about us." Suddenly, the undergrowth parted, revealing a creature that made the entire team freeze in their tracks. It was massive, easily the size of the Horizon's shuttle, with a body structure that seemed impossible. A blend of the gap's fluid grace and the raw power of the apex predator they had encountered on New Terra. Dylan's heart raced as he instinctively reached for Daphne's hand. Their fingers interlocked, and in that moment, something extraordinary happened. A wave of calm washed over them both, and with it came a flood of images and sensations. They saw vast organic ships traversing the cosmos, carrying within them the seeds of life. Planets once barren, blooming with new ecosystems. And always at the center of these visions, creatures like the one before them, guiding and nurturing the spread of life across the galaxy. "Dylan," Daphne gasped, her voice filled with awe. "Are you seeing this?" He nodded, unable to find words to describe the magnitude of what they were experiencing. Through their shared connection, they reached out to the creature, conveying their peaceful intentions and their desire to learn. The creature's response was immediate and profound. It lowered its massive head, bringing one enormous eye level with Dylan and Daphne. In that gaze, they saw intelligence, wisdom, and a spark of recognition. Over the next few weeks, Dylan and Daphne's unique ability to communicate with the planet's fauna led to unprecedented discoveries. They cataloged hundreds of new species, each more fascinating than the last. But it was their connection with the Jap-like creatures that yielded the most groundbreaking insights. During one of their daily expeditions, the creature they had first encountered led them to a hidden valley. As they crested a ridge, Dylan and Daphne's jaws dropped in unison. Before them lay the ruins of an ancient city, its bioorganic structures half reclaimed by the jungle. "This is incredible," Dylan breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the sight. "Daphne, do you realize what this means?" She nodded, her scales shimmering with excitement. An advanced civilization, capable of interstellar travel, and somehow connected to the gaps in these creatures. As they explored the ruins, guided by their alien companion, they discovered chambers filled with strange pulsing technology. When Dylan and Daphne approached these devices, they felt a familiar tingling sensation, the same they had experienced during their physiological changes. Placing their hands on one of the consoles, they were suddenly inundated with information. Star charts, biological data, and technological schematics flooded their minds. Among this torrent of knowledge, they found something that made their hearts race. Detailed information on the Veil Collective's weapons and defenses, along with methods to neutralize them. "This could change everything," Daphne said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "We need to get this information back to the Galactic Council immediately." As they prepared to transmit their findings, Dylan noticed something odd about his reflection in one of the metallic surfaces. His skin had taken on a subtle, scale-like texture, while Daphne's scales seemed to have developed a more human-like suppleness. "Daphne," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "I think we're still changing, adapting." She examined her own body, her eyes widening in realization. "It's as if we're becoming something new, something in between." Their moment of discovery was interrupted by an urgent communication from the horizon. The news of their findings had already begun to spread, causing shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Veil Collective was in turmoil, its once unified front splintering as moderate factions pushed for peace. As Dylan and Daphne prepared to return to the horizon, Their alien guide presented them with a small pulsing orb. Somehow they understood that this was a key, a means to access the full repository of knowledge left behind by the ancient spacefaring race. With the orb secured and their minds brimming with new understanding, they boarded their shuttle. As they lifted off, Dylan and Daphne looked out over the alien landscape, knowing that their discoveries here would reshape the galaxy in ways they were only beginning to comprehend. The Horizon's engines hummed to life, ready to carry them back to New Terra and the waiting Galactic Council. But as they broke atmosphere, both Dylan and Daphne knew that this was just the beginning. The true implications of their discoveries and the changes happening within their own bodies were yet to be fully understood. As the stars streaked past the viewports, Dylan pulled Daphne close, feeling the warmth of her scales against his increasingly resilient skin. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not just as a team, but as something entirely new in the history of the galaxy.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.